Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 52 of Daffy's Roundtable. On this episode, I'm joined by my good friend and extraordinary reptile keeper and breeder, Alex from Alex's Reptile World. Alex works with an incredible assortment of some of the more uncommon reptiles, and in today's episode, we're going to take a deep dive into two of those species. You've already seen the episode title by now, so you probably already know what species we're talking about. But just to emphasize the excitement, Fiji Iguanas and Indigo snakes. But before we do that, allow me to thank Terra for sponsoring this podcast and making this episode possible. Terra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. Okay, without further ado, let's dive into this awesome conversation with Alex. Enjoy. Alex, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. We have not been talking for the past half an hour.
No, not at all.
We just started this conversation. It's completely natural. Okay, awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for coming on. We're finally doing this.
Yeah.
We both have very busy schedules and have been trying to make this work for a very long time. I feel like I say that with a lot of my guests, but it's true.
Yeah, I think this is like 2 years in the making now.
Yeah. See, it's true. But it's finally happening. We're ready to do this. We're ready to go. We have a very interesting episode for you guys today. We're going to be talking about a lot of really cool species, starting with the Fiji iguanas. But before we dive into that, Alex, can you tell us how you used to get started in the hobby and like where you're currently at in the hobby?
So the way I got started was my parents would never let me have any snakes or anything as a pet when I was a kid. So I went to college, I became a marine engineer, and I went to a reptile show and I bought my first snake. The second reptile show I went to, I bought 3 more. And then it just spiraled right after that.
That's usually how it goes.
I had about 200 ball pythons at one point, got overwhelmed, and I had to sell them off. Then I got married and then divorced, and then I started collecting all the rare stuff.
There's nobody tell you not to do it. That's why. That's awesome. Do you remember what the first species was? Was it a ball python? Was that
my first snake was a pastel ball python. I still know where it is. My friend has it.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Did you ever breed that snake?
My second was a wild caught normal ball python. Okay. That's about 30 years old right now, roughly. And another friend has that one.
That's awesome. It's really cool seeing that. It must be really cool seeing your animal like that far down and seeing it still alive, still healthy.
For sure. This female only eats ASFs and eats about 6 months out of the year. That's it.
That's okay. That's super. Yeah. I everyone who listens already knows this. I don't keep ball pythons. I don't really know much about ball pythons, but that whole like feeding problem that they seem to have is very interesting to me. It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't think it's more of a feeding problem. I think it's more that in the wild they wouldn't eat as frequently or as the size they would get normally in captivity. So in captivity they're in a cage that they don't do anything in, and they're fed rats constantly, so they become obese very quickly. So to stop themselves from having, and this is not tested or anything, this is just my opinion after keeping them for so long, after they stop themselves from being obese and basically getting a heart attack, they'll stop eating and you burn off the body fat. But still they're in a tank and it doesn't do anything to burn off body fat.
Right.
There's only so much movement you can do in that tank. So it takes months, sometimes years, for a ball python to lose enough weight for it to want to start eating again.
Yeah, it's almost like they're self-regulating themselves.
Exactly. So that's my opinion on it. I doubt it's correct, but that's just what I've seen.
No, it definitely makes sense. I'm sure they're smarter than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Awesome. Okay, so before you kind of give us like that quick rundown of all the awesome species that you're keeping and working with, what are you currently doing for work?
I work at Big Al's. I've actually been working at Big Al's for the reptile section in Scarborough for the last 10 years now.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I've been working with reptiles for at least 15 years.
Awesome. So that's actually how me and Alex met. Every time I'm in the area, I have to drop by and see him. And I go to a lot of Big Al's props to you. The reptile section at Your Big Al's is by far the best, and you guys
Thank
always
you.
have the coolest species that are like really well cared for. So props to you. It's always awesome visiting. If you're in Scarborough in the area, go visit Alex. But yeah, okay, awesome. Give us a bit of like a rundown of the species you're keeping.
Right now, I keep eastern indigos, yellowtail caribos, blacktail caribos, um, a few boas, boa morse leopard IMG. Um, I have Fiji iguanas, Australian frill dragons, green tree pythons, emerald tree boas, a Cook's tree boa, which I've only ever found one of, and that was a random chance that it showed up. And I have one ball python and a leopard gecko for my son.
You have to.
I have to,
You have to.
exactly.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay. Shall we dive into the Fiji iguanas?
Sure.
Okay. So, first thing I want to know before we go any further is because I really don't understand this. Because every time I see them at the expo, I say, "Oh, it's this," and then I hear, "No, it's that." And to me, because I've never kept them and I don't really know much about them, they all look the same to me. But there is more than one species, correct?
Yes. Overall,
Okay.
there's 5 species,
Okay.
but 3 of them are the most popular ones: the fasciatus, the balabua, and the vitinensis.
Okay. Awesome.
The fasciatus and the balabua are the most common ones. The vitinensis is the crested Fiji iguana, which is really quite rare in Canada. Only I think a couple of people in Canada have it right now, which is amazing, like to even have it.
Yeah.
But the rest are just small subspecies that were written, described, but not, but they're not very different except for a few scale patterns.
Okay. Interesting. So, which one is the one that you're keeping and working with?
I work with the Balabu,
Okay. And
the
what's the
central Fiji band, central banded Fiji iguana. That's what
okay?
it's.
And the differences visually are kind of like, uh, is there structural difference or is it just colors and patterns?
It's colors and patterns. If it's on an island, sometimes island giganticism comes into play. So sometimes the males are much larger.
Okay.
But most of the time, it's just color. Color. The visual difference would be the color difference.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So, how long have you been working with them, and what's
Uh,
your favorite thing about them?
so I was never a guy who was into Fiji iguanas, never into iguanas at all, actually. And
Okay.
then a friend suggested it to me to look into it, and I looked into it, and I was like, "Whoa, that's really cool." And then I forgot about them. Then an opportunity came up to get a pair, and I was like, "Okay, yeah." My favorite thing about them, honestly, is their size. I don't have the space in my house to have a 7 foot long tank and a 7 foot and sorry, a 10 foot long tank and a 7 foot long lizard like a green iguana. These guys stay about 2 feet, 2.5 feet at most, and majority of that is tail. So
Yeah.
mine are in a 4x2x6 usually. My females lay eggs in 4x18 by 4, and that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to get into the breeding stuff.
Yeah.
But before that, you mentioned like the 10-foot space for the green iguana. Have you ever kept any other iguanas?
No, like
No.
I said before, I've never been interested into iguanas. Like
Okay.
I've
Yeah.
never looked into it because everybody had an iguana, so I didn't want to do that. But then now working with the Fijis, I'm looking at the rhino rock iguanas and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
of course, I can't get them in Canada, so
Yeah.
it's okay. I'm still
Yeah.
looking.
One day, one day.
Exactly.
So what are some of the biggest differences you think between like the green iguana and the Fiji? I know you haven't kept them, but like from what you know.
Um, Green iguanas' main difference is size and personality. Like Fiji iguanas can be more aggressive, but within a few hours of working with them, or even an hour of working with them, they'll tame down. They'll sit on your hand. They won't try to run away from you, and they won't try to bite you.
This is the Fiji iguanas?
Yeah, these are the Fijis.
Oh,
Green
okay, interesting.
iguanas, if they're already adults, they can be very temperamental. Their claws are really sharp, and they have a really nasty bite if they get it to you.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen some pretty bad pictures.
Yeah. So the Fijis are just easier to handle. Like it's just more manageable for me. That's why, and the color is phenomenal. Like beyond reproach, that the color that they get is amazing.
Yeah. And then okay, so you said they start or like they can be aggressive, but are they I've also seen like pictures and videos of people just hanging out. Can they be as calm as like are they easy to tame down and handle? I guess is my question.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Okay.
The last Fiji iguana I sold at the reptile show, when I brought him to the show, he was wild. By the end of that show, he was sitting in my hand without any issue. He didn't even want to run away. And it's not that he wasn't warm. He was just more comfortable with the fact that I'm not hurting him. He's just going to come outside and sit in my hand or sit on my shoulder
Sit in your
and hang
shoulder.
out with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the one that Greg took?
That's the one, yeah.
Okay, so that is Snoop currently with Greg. Shout out beneath the canopy exotics. He's still like that, still calm, and Greg's doing an awesome job with him as well. What about diet wise? Are they do they eat the same thing as the green iguana, or like what do you feed yours?
My iguanas basically eat a vegetarian diet. I do supplement with calcium and vitamins like normal, but I do also give them proteins like insects. They still do love their crickets and worms. I don't give to them often. Usually, when females are breeding or laying eggs, I give them extra protein and calcium. But otherwise, it's more like a treat for them.
Interesting. Do you ever give them like pinky mice or anything like that?
I've tried, and they've rejected that completely. They've like knocked it away from the tongs to the point
Yeah,
where I tried a few times and they had no interest in that whatsoever. But if
that
I
makes
put a
sense.
cricket in front of them, they'll take it right out of my fingers.
Okay, yeah. So they actively eat the insects. It's not like something they'll grab every now and then.
Exactly. Yeah. If they come across it, they're gonna eat it.
Okay, and is that normal for iguanas, or are other iguanas like strictly herbivores?
I can't say that they're strictly herbivores because if they're in the wild, they're potentially eating
Probably just
worms and
grabbing.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. But for the most part, yeah, most people will just feed their iguanas a vegetarian diet, which is not harmful for them. But in the early years, it's better. It's okay to have a little protein to give them their growth spurt.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, awesome. Okay. And then another thing you said is the difference in size of the enclosures of like I guess your pairs versus what you're keeping your females in.
Yeah.
So is that so like run me through how you kind of keep them through the year. Are you pairing them and just removing the females to let them lay, or are they usually separated and then you're pairing them for a bit and then yeah,
So
what
what
do you
I
do?
have, I right now I have four adult females and two adult males.
Okay.
I've tried to collect separate bloodlines
Awesome.
as much as I can. So sorry. As so I have individual tanks for most of my iguanas. I keep an adult pair in one tank always, and I rotate the female out of that tank always.
Okay.
And the male doesn't seem to mind me rotating the female out, and the female gets pretty dominant in that tank pretty quickly.
Okay. Super interesting. And then you said the female becomes dominant like towards the male?
Yeah, because she tends to eat more, especially if he mates with her. She'll take the initiative to go to the food bowl first to eat, and while she's developing eggs.
Okay. Now, are they seasonal breeders, or is it kind of multiple clutches a year, or how does it work?
They'll lay multiple clutches a year. I think I've gotten four clutches a year from one of my bigger females,
At
which
any
is
point in
really,
time?
yeah, any point in time. I pretty much, I haven't gotten the actual numbers down, but I can pretty much tell when my females are going to be gravid. So I usually rotate them into that, put them with the male at that point. And usually after they lay eggs, I give them about a 1 month break where they can get at least a 1 month break where they can build up their energy stores again and gain all their weight back and like go back to full strength basically.
Interesting. Sorry, you said when they're about to be gravid, you put them in with the
With
male?
the male, yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. Like when they're
Sorry,
sort of
when
ovulating.
sorry when they're males, when I know she's ready to mate with the male and
Yeah,
she's back to size, that's
yeah.
when I put them together.
And then how long until, or like roughly until they're laying eggs?
Within a month and a half, sometimes 2 months, It's not an exact science for that because some of my females take longer to develop eggs.
Of course.
But once I start seeing the eggs developing in the body, then I move them to their own tank and give them their own space and everything. So
Yeah, and of course you're pulling the eggs and you're putting them in an incubator.
yes, definitely.
What temperature? I'm
Uh,
stealing all your
temperature
secrets today.
temperatures actually can range quite a bit. So I incubate the eggs at 82 degrees Fahrenheit normally, but they can. There's a huge range that they can fit in. I've lost a lot of eggs because I've cooked them because I've put them at too high at 87, which was what I read online at one point, and then I talked to a bunch of people online, and they said no, it's way too high.
Wait, so
So I went back down, and they've told me higher ranges that it can work, but I found that 82 to 82, 81.5, 82 is usually what I keep them at just to have a good success rate.
do you get an even ratio of like males to females?
I'll be honest with you, I didn't expect to, but so far every clutch I've had has been a 50-50 ratio. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that it's not saying that it's because of the temperature or because I'm saying it's random chance. But I've had 50-50 ratio every time.
Every time. Yeah. Can you tell the sex of the baby right off the bat?
99% of the time you can. You can see the blues in the males immediately. Sometimes if you get a less dominant male, you'll have the color shows up a little later. But most of the time, you like 90% of the time, you can tell them immediately.
Is that the only way to sex them? Is it a color thing?
Yeah, females are usually green with a little bit of blue. A little bit of blue, but the males have the real banding across their bodies, and
Yeah.
most of the time you can see it.
And do all the species have banding?
Yes,
See, this is what confuses me. Because one of them is called, or I guess the common. So I need to look into it. But so one of them, the common name is banded, and the other one, the common name is crested.
the crested iguana has a. You know how a water dragon, an adult water dragon, has that crest on the spike crest on the back.
Yeah.
So the crested iguana has that and the bands. It's a bigger, heavy bodied iguana
Okay.
for sure.
Okay.
It's
Sorry.
it's
And
one of
does one
my
of them only have red eyes or something?
I'm not sure. Like most of mine have the same colored eyes, so I
Okay.
couldn't tell you if it's red eyes or if they're albino or have the gene for albino or something in it. So I couldn't tell you that for sure. But the ones I
Super
work
interesting.
with all have the same colored eyes, so
It's super interesting. Super super interesting.
a lot of fun. Trust me. Yeah, they come from the Fijian Islands, all
Yeah.
from all the islands around there. A lot of them they're a species of concern now because of well, people have introduced invasive species like rats and stuff eating the eggs. They've actually introduced green iguanas to the islands, so they're competing for territory now. And when you got an iguana that's 7 feet compared to 2 feet, the 7 foot usually wins in most fights. So,
Yeah. Of course. Of
so
course.
that's usually the main problem right now.
So they're endangered over there, but
Yeah,
they won't send them out to. They won't send them out to be bred anywhere else, right? So okay, do you know anything about the laws surrounding them because they're illegal in the United States, right?
that's correct. Yeah, they're
Uh,
Appendix One, CITES Appendix One, so they won't bring them into the states. Why I don't know, and I don't have an official answer for that. But everything I've read is because they're CITES Appendix One, they won't bring them in. That's all it. That's all I've heard. But in Canada, most of them come through Europe. People in Europe have phenomenal collections of iguanas, and most of them come from there.
Interesting. So I read a book called Lost Worlds or something, and it talked about like all the smuggling and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Of the Fiji iguana and how sort of apparently the San Diego Zoo is also, and I don't want to like, I'm not calling anybody out here. I'm
of
just,
course.
but like apparently the San Diego Zoo was breeding them really well for a while, and then was getting too many of them, or something. It's been a while. I can't remember the exact details, but they were so successful and they couldn't keep all of them on the exhibit, so they just started selling them to the hobbyists like under the table, and so they kind of started getting spread in the United States. So they're actually apparently there just very
Local.
quietly. Yeah, nobody knows. or nobody
As,
talks about it?
as far as I know, I haven't heard of anybody in the States with them, but I
Yeah,
could, like, it's just like any other animal, like, you could potentially have it, and they just don't talk about it, right?
they just
Like,
don't talk about it. Yeah.
but yeah, the San Diego Zoo definitely has it. The Toronto Zoo just started, has them right now, and they just got a new clutch of eggs this year.
Oh
So
yeah,
they just hatched out a first clutch. So
that's very cool.
yeah,
Is there any possibility, and I don't know if this even makes sense, is there any possibility of like everybody like the Toronto Zoo trading bloodlines with you and with other breeders and other hobbyists to kind of keep everything going
no,
stronger? Is that not something?
not likely unless you have a CASA license.
Yeah,
Zoos can't officially trade with hobbyists. So and
makes
CASA
sense.
is only given to zoos. So that's not really a likely. That's not very likely to happen.
Right.
And once you have a CASA license, you have to declare what you have. So
Yeah,
most hobbyists don't want to declare what they have. So
yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, and I guess if they were able to bring in the initial breeding group, they can probably bring in fresh blood from somewhere
yeah,
else.
like the zoos can actively trade within between each other.
Yeah,
So Toronto could trade with San Diego without any issue.
right. That makes
So,
sense. Yeah. Well, okay, so we jumped right to breeding right after that, but we didn't really discuss like care and that kind of thing. So tell me like how hot are you keeping them? Did you keep a like a hot spot? Are you doing yeah? What's the setup like?
my rule for my rule for my iguanas, I give them one nice big hotspot. Usually has like 5 or 6 branches just in that area that they can choose whichever one they want to lay on, and different thicknesses of branches. I've seen my iguanas lay on like little twigs compared to like full tree trunks that are all available in that one area. And then the rest of the tank is just a random assortment of branches at different sizes and thicknesses, and that's usually what they want. They need places coverage. So if I don't have enough foliage in one area, they'll go behind the tree trunk on the other side. So when I walk in, they shift their body and hide a little bit more.
That
So
makes
that,
sense. Are they like mostly arboreal, like always
yeah,
top of the tank? Yeah,
I've very rarely seen my male iguana come down to the bottom of the tank. My female comes down to lay eggs, obviously,
yeah,
but majority of the time they stay to the top.
yeah. That makes sense. Do you have any idea on how good of swimmers they are? Do they ever
They
use
can.
water? Or...
I'm sure they can swim. I've never actually put my iguanas in water. They actually don't like me giving them water like that.
Yeah,
Like I've tried spraying them with a spray bottle, and they try to attack the spray bottle. So I just
yeah.
put them on my misking now, and they get it from that. So
Okay,
they know where to get the water from.
that makes sense.
Um,
Yeah,
I'm sure they're pretty good swimmers, like most lizards are. So I wouldn't. I'm not like if I even if I had a big pool at the bottom, I wouldn't be too worried of them drowning or anything like that.
yeah. Okay. Sorry, what did you say earlier? The hotspot you keep it at?
The hotspot I keep at 28 degrees Celsius, uh, uh,
28?
28 degrees Celsius at the hotspot. It ranges too because if you're closer to the lamp, it'll get hotter, right? So
Yeah.
at their main basking area where I keep it, they have the option of getting closer if they want, or moving further away.
Yeah,
And
and
then,
where do you find they're mostly hanging out? Do they
uh,
use it a lot?
yeah, at the 28-degree mark, like
Yeah.
it's kind of impressive that they know exactly where they want it. And
Yeah.
usually the male will lay there, the female will either try to push the male out, uh, or the she'll lay on top of the female sometimes. Sorry,
Okay.
the female will lay on top of the male.
Yeah. Have you ever kept I think you maybe answered this about the dominance thing earlier, but have you ever kept like a trio in a tank, or do females not get along?
I've kept trios in the tank. I've tried it in the beginning when I had them,
Okay.
and what I found is you get a dominant female that starts to starve out the submissive subdominant female. So I always found that I always had one iguana that was always smaller and weaker and not getting enough food, even with the amount of space I gave them. So I always tend to separate them now, and I always keep a pair.
And yeah, and you already said you don't keep the pair together year round.
No, I rotate my females out with my male.
Yeah, I'm asking all these questions as if like mountain horn dragons are going to be the exact same thing, but exactly currently what I'm going through right now with the mountain horn dragons. I
Yeah.
just paired them for the first time, and I'm wondering if I should keep the male or the pair together all year, or sort of rotate out the females.
If you want different bloodlines, that's the main reason I rotate out the females.
Yeah,
So between my two males, I rotate out the females to whoever's ready at the time. And
yeah,
then
that makes
like I
sense.
do give my males a break. Like sometimes I give them 3 to 4 months off, and I don't breed them even if the females are laying eggs because the males get worn out too, and I don't want them to become in like I don't want them to get weaker for no reason.
Right, that makes sense.
So
Do you brewmate them? Do you like cool them at all at any point of the
no,
year?
I've never had to cool them, but there's a pretty big temperature gradient. My lowest temperature in the tank is 21, and the highest is like 28 and a little bit higher. So there's a huge temperature gradient depending on where you are in the tank. So
That makes sense. And then like when the female is about to lay her eggs, do you have lay boxes, or is it just kind of I'm just gonna
I've
search the
tried
whole
lay
tank till I find
boxes.
the eggs?
That's
Yeah.
literally female's choice. I've had lay boxes in tanks, and they've literally laid beside the lay box. I've had them go in the lay box, dig out all the dirt, and then go beside the lay box. And I've had one female that lays only in the lay box. So it just literally just depends on that female.
That's very
Usually, what
funny.
I find is if I put a branch or something or a piece of wood in the tank, they usually go under that piece of wood and lay under that. So I've been trying little experiments here and there, but it's in the end I just have to see where they're digging.
That's
So
very funny. So when I first started doing Cresties a long time ago, my first year, 100% success of every single egg in the lay box. Year two, not a single egg was laid in the lay box, and actually most of them I was finding like under the lay box. Like
oh
instead of
really?
digging, they would dig them and lay them under the lay box. And then and I've also noticed the stick thing, but like more of like if there was like a plant or like a tree kind of structure, they'd like dig to the roots and lay the eggs almost against the roots and then cover
Yeah.
them back up.
So
It's
there's some kind
interesting.
of protection for the eggs.
So
That
yeah, so that must be what it is. I've
that's
noticed
what
that
I
as well.
assume it. That's what I assume it's the reason why they do that because it's harder to move something that's already embedded in the ground, and
Yeah.
most animals won't dig that deep. So if a predatory animal is digging down in the wild into the eggs, if they run into a tree stump, they're not usually going to dig in through a tree stump to get to the eggs. So,
They're just gonna give up and
yeah.
move on. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so yeah, how long do the eggs take to hatch?
So that's the really annoying thing about them. They can
Yeah,
range from 125 days to 200 days. So there's no set temperature. Usually, if you have a higher temperature, they incubate
faster.
faster, they hatch faster.
Hmm.
But most of mine take about closer to 200 days.
So do you check the incubator every day or?
I check them. I'd like to say I check them every day, but I'll be honest, I check them every 2 to 3 days.
Okay, that
And
makes sense.
usually I have multiple temperature sensors and humidity sensors in the incubator. So even with the thermostat running, I look at all the sensors to make sure they're all right. If I read that they see that they're all right and look at the eggs and there's no mold growth or over condensation in the tank in the container, then I don't really worry about it.
Yeah. No, I think you'd probably go crazy if you were checking the eggs every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's when you work with a lot of species, it's harder when you have 6 different incubators running at 6 different temperatures and trying to figure out why one's not working. So
Yeah. And I think after a while you learn to sort of the more you mess with them, the less success you're gonna get, and you kind of learn to leave the
yeah,
eggs alone and not
that's
mess
the
with
honest
them too
truth.
often.
Like when I first had them, I used to candle the eggs and stuff. Now I look at the egg, I'm like, okay, that's fertile. I put it in
Yeah.
the incubator, I leave it alone. I
Yeah.
look at it through the door, and that's it. That's it. I don't even open. Try not to open it if I don't have to.
That makes sense. And how do you set the eggs up? Is it are you going straight into the substrate, or like egg trays, or yeah,
Um,
what's your
I've tried
setup?
a lot of things, but the most success I've had is vermiculite or perlite. I make a damp section at the bottom of a Rubbermaid container or like a Tupperware container, and then I put about an inch of dry perlite or a vermiculite on top of it, and then I bury the egg in that dry perlite or vermiculite. Right now, I'm using perlite, so
Okay.
it's that way the egg gets the humidity it needs, but it still stays dry enough, and no mold growth or anything happens with that.
That's interesting. So the bottom is wet, and then you put like a dry layer on top of it.
Exactly, and
Okay, yeah.
technically, most of the time the water stays is heavier, so it stays down to the bottom of the container anyway,
Right.
but still creates that humidity that it needs. So.
Yeah. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay, so now they've hatched. Are the babies tough? Do they eat right away or like?
Within usually when I see them hatching, I usually leave them in the incubator until I see them moving around on their own. I don't try to pull them and put them in a separate tank or anything. The incubator is warm enough and at the right temperature for them. And usually, what happens is when one hatches and it starts moving around, it triggers the others to hatch. So if like one runs and steps on the egg of another, the other one gets excited and comes out the next day, or starts cutting itself out of the egg.
Yeah.
So I usually leave them in the incubator until they're 3 out of 4 are usually out, or at least their heads are out, and then the 1 or 2 that are most dominant that are active, I'll pull them first, and then I'll let the other 2 come out on their own.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then okay, so are you raising them in groups or is each baby getting an individual tank?
No, I raise them in groups. It's
Raising
too
groups.
much. I keep them. The babies are in 1836 skyscraper, and they have the whole tank to climb around in. And I have, I think, 2 to 3 feeding bowls at different levels to get them started eating. But once you get them eating, I usually just get them, bring it down to one, and they all take turns going to it. And then you'll see the hierarchy happening almost immediately. You'll
Yeah.
see who's the dominance and who's not.
Who's the yeah, who's the big boy? And
Yeah.
what are you putting in those feeding bowls? Is it like greens or worms? Or
Mostly greens,
either?
actually. Mostly
Greens. Okay.
greens.
Yeah.
Worms, I don't do worms because they're not very active. I
Okay.
want the iguanas to be active, so I
Yeah.
usually put crickets in and make them chase it around the tank.
That makes sense.
I have cork on the walls and everything, so they can literally climb on the walls itself to get a cricket.
Yeah.
Uh, Most of the greens I use are like dandelion greens, collard greens, bok choy. A lot of the Asian grocery stores that I go to have a nice variety of greens that I always pick something new, chop it up, and just give it to them. They usually don't say no.
Yeah, that makes sense. And are they fast growers? Like how what's the growth rate? Is it
If
are
you
they
give
really
them a
slow?
variety, if you give them a variety of food and a good good amount of calcium and vitamins, they grow pretty quickly. It's You can get them to a juvenile size within almost a year and a half to 2 years, roughly.
Okay.
I don't keep track of the exact rate of growth because I'm not that concerned. Like once I decide to keep an animal, I'll let it grow at the rate it needs to
It
grow
needs
at.
to grow up
So
for sure.
I'll feed it as I do all my animals. And if it decides to eat that day more or less, I feed it. So
Yeah. How you said juvenile in a year and a half ish.
yeah.
So how long before you'd consider it like a sexually mature adult?
Uh Once I see the juvenile male flaring up at the adult male, then I know he's almost there. But once like by just comparing the sizes of my adult male and my juvenile male, or now my subadult male, they're almost like the subadult male is literally there. It's just that my adult male is more dominant. That's all it is.
So maybe let's jump to some of the other cool species you're keeping. One of the ones that fascinates me the most are the indigos. You already know this. So I have been to Alex's house and I've seen his collection. I've seen all the awesome animals. But it was something about the indigo snake that's visually, I don't know. They're fascinating. The scales almost look like armor. Like they look like something out of like a horror movie, but in the coolest way. When did you start keeping them? And and what's your opinion on it?
I got into indigos actually a little bit after I just got the Fijis.
Okay, cool.
Um, it was something that I never thought of keeping a colubrid. I was always into pythons and boas, never into colubrids, never into. anything like that. And then the opportunity came up for an indigo. So I just took my chance, took a shot at it, and I got a pair, an
Awesome.
adult pair of Drymarchon cooperi, the the eastern indigos.
Awesome.
With them, they're probably the scariest and the most fun snakes you can have because their food drive is amazing. Like they're ready to go all the time. My
Yeah.
male is in full shed. He's fully blue. He'll eat a two medium rats in one shot if I give it to him, like
That's
without
awesome.
trying. He'll sniff
Yeah.
it out without like I can leave it in the tank and walk away, and he'll eat it. Then by like within 10 minutes, it's gone.
That's yeah. It's always nice to see a snake with a good food drive.
Yeah,
So what was it? Are they one of the species that was like almost knocking on the glass when we were there?
that's the
They
exact one.
they
Yeah,
will do it. Yeah.
the male was literally tapping at the glass trying to get out.
Is that so? Are they? Yeah. Is that what they're doing? Are they trying to get out, or is it
There,
like
it
a
it
eating
sensed
response?
movement, so it thought it was getting fed.
It
So
okay.
So I try to keep my animals as naturally wild as possible. I do handle them because I let my 5-year-old son play with these, like hold the indigos and stuff. So I need to make sure they're safe for him. But what's it called? I try to keep my animals as active and as wild as possible, essentially.
Yeah.
So right now I'm building them big tank individually. So a 6x2x3. Yeah, I'm building two of those right now for each of the two adults I have. So
That's awesome. Okay. So how big is how big do they get?
my adult male is almost 6 feet right now, just shy of 6 feet. Uh, in this species, actually, it's weird, but males actually are bigger than females, and they have. Most people try to have a bread-shaped body. I try to keep my indigos with a triangular-shaped body. When indigos first came out, like when the people were originally working with them, what I learned from the people I talked to was that people fed them so much food, and because they would eat, they kept feeding them. So you got indigos that were round, and they wouldn't produce babies. They wouldn't do anything. They would just be obese.
Yeah.
So when one of the people I was working with, he was one of the first people to breed the indigos in Canada, and he taught me that you don't feed or you don't overfeed them. You keep them in a triangular shaped body so they're always responsive and looking for food, but you don't overfeed them. That's the main thing.
That's super interesting. Do we know why their scales are so much different than other snakes and why they look so cool?
Uh, Honestly, I couldn't tell you why their scales
No.
look so different, but I've just seen that it's very. It feels like armor in your hand when
It
you're
does.
holding it.
It feels like armor, and it almost feels like I don't know if I don't know if this makes sense, but you know when you see armor and like they close their hands and almost like sheaths or like closes on top of each other.
Exactly, yeah.
It almost looks like it closes up on each other. So like it must be some defense mechanism.
It definitely helps with. I'm sure it helps with because they're also snake eaters. They have to protect themselves against other snake bites and stuff. So that kind of scaling would protect them against that. Whereas a ball python, if a because their scales are so small and soft, the if a snake bit it, it would penetrate the scales more than likely because there's so many smaller scales for the teeth to penetrate.
Okay, so there's so much to unpack there. Okay, so
Sorry,
so first of all, no, that's good, that's good. So first of all, that must be what it is, right? It's that their scales are so much bigger than
and
other,
thicker.
like
They're
each and thicker, but each individual scale is so much bigger and thicker than. So that must be what gives it the visual difference, right?
yeah, definitely.
Okay, interesting. Okay, and then the other thing, the other big thing here that I had no idea, they're snake eaters.
Yeah.
So where do they come from, like naturally, and what snakes are they eating in the wild?
So uh, Drymarchons are from southern United States, Central America, and South America.
Oh, okay,
There is 5 recognized species and about 3 or 4 subspecies depending on locality.
okay,
So the eastern indigo, the cooperi, Drymarchon cooperi, the Drymarchon coriace, the yellowtail caribo, and are the two most common ones. The blacktail is a smaller species of those, and The Mexican red tail is also a really nice one. Top body black, the belly is red. Um, and there's also on the eastern part of Mexico, or sorry, Central America, there is the unicolors. So it's basically a tan indigo snake, and the Texas indigos are more black with white patching, and they're from Texas, obviously. So yeah,
Um,
that's so those are the one. And there's also a white-tailed indigo that's from Central America. So
whitetail or yellowtail?
white-tail,
Whitetail. So there's the yellowtail and there's whitetail.
yellowtail, black-tail, and white-tail. The white-tail isn't as common, that's for sure. I have not seen it in the pet trade actually.
The whitetail.
The white-tail, yeah. But the yellowtail by far is one of the biggest species, probably one of my favorites, other than the eastern. Because if you look at my Instagram, I posted a picture of one of my yellowtails, and it is stunning. The size, it's not even a full-size adult yet, and it's a male, and it's already like it dwarfs a lot of my other snakes.
Yeah, those are the ones you were just showing me before we started, right?
Yeah, those are the ones I showed you before, the blacktails. Those actually stay smaller than most of the other species.
The ones you showed me were the blacktails.
Were the blacktails, yeah.
Okay,
The yellowtails are like double the size of that.
that's very interesting. So I had no idea that the yellowtails and the indigo and the blacktails were all the same.
They're
Uh,
all the same family, yeah.
yeah. Okay. That's super interesting. Okay, so they're from you said Central South America,
Yeah.
Southern
Southern
United
United,
States.
yeah.
So what species of snakes are there? Are they strictly snake eaters
No,
or
they will eat literally everything. I feed
okay.
my chicks, I feed them frog legs, I feed them fish, I feed them rats. They literally will eat anything you put in front of them. So that's why they're probably one of the most successful species, because they're not limited to what's around. They can literally eat anything around them.
Do any of the species cross over anywhere?
Yeah, actually a lot of them do.
Yeah.
The yellowtails, the unicolors, the blacktails. The blacktails are mainly from Central America. They cross over into a lot of the territories, but they're also a smaller species. The Mexican red-tailed indigos, they go into Central America and into the states, where the Texas indigos are, and the Cupra usually are eastern, so Atlanta and Georgia area.
Is there any signs of them like um, interbreeding?
I I haven't seen I haven't done enough research to see if they'll crossbreed, but I don't see why they wouldn't or why they couldn't.
Yeah.
Um, except for the fact that they will try to eat each other sometimes. So
Yeah, yeah. I guess especially if there's size differences too.
exactly, like if
Hmm.
I put a yellowtail with one of my indigos, I could see one of my indigos getting eaten from a
Yeah.
adult male yellowtail. So
Yeah. Well, your indigo was the first one I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of pictures of them because I think they're a fascinating snake.
yeah,
But seeing yours in person and actually holding it, I was surprised at the size and the weight and the strength of them as well. I was not expecting them to be that big.
yeah, it's like a supersized corn snake that has like 1,000 times more strength.
Yeah, and like like we were saying, like an armor plated corn snake.
Yeah, exactly. It's a phenomenal animal to work with. Like if I've only been successful breeding them once, and I try to breed them every year. Mine are an original captive bred pair, but
Sorry, what was that?
mine are an original captive bred pair from
Captive bred.
from the person I got it from.
Okay.
But he was working with them for years before me. So
Hmm.
so I've only been successful breeding once, but I'm in no rush to breed them. If they don't take 1 year or 2 years, I'm not that concerned. I'm not pushing their bodies to the limit to try to pump out as many babies as I can. I'd rather have them be healthy and live a long life. And if they produce babies for me, amazing. If they
Yeah.
don't, I still have such an amazing creature that it's still awesome to have.
Yeah. You said captive bred, so are usually most of the ones in the hobby or most of the ones we're seeing are they usually wild caught?
No, you can't actually bring the
You don't really see
Cooperai,
them.
the Eastern Indigos. You can't actually bring them out of the states anymore. they're federally protected. You can't bring
Wow.
them into the States either. So whatever bloodlines you have of the
I
Cooperari
see.
right now is what you have in Canada.
Okay, that makes sense.
The other ones, the Mexican red tails, the Texas indigos, all those are more common. The yellowtails come in regularly. The blacktails are not as common, but they're really nice. Uh, the unicolors have been in here. I've seen a few shipments of those come in. So
Why do you think? Um, why do you think we don't see them more often in the hobby? Is it because they're just not easy to breed, or is it? Do you think there's just not enough interest in them?
it's both actually. It's it's also a big snake. People are
Yeah.
afraid of big snakes for the most part, and people don't think of when they think of a big snake, they think retic or Burmese or anaconda. They don't think of a giant colubrid. So it's not something that most people know about. That's actually, I think, what it is. And the people who know about them understand them and they're like mesmerized by them, like I am. But the people who don't just don't. That's all I think it is. So it's
Right.
just not enough knowledge about them.
Right. So you were successful breeding them once.
I was,
Were
but I
you
only got
able?
one egg to hatch.
You only got one
So
egg to hatch.
yeah, and that was my one male baby, and he's growing phenomenally.
He is.
For the first year, he wouldn't eat. For the first year, he wouldn't eat for me, so I had to force feed him. So I got really good at force feeding angry snakes. But after that, like once he started eating on his own, it was perfect. Like he eats almost an adult mouse now, like just as sized up from an adult mouse every week at this point.
Right.
They have much
Interesting.
higher metabolism, so they burn through mice and rats really quickly.
Yeah. I already mentioned this to you, but I need to introduce you to Jan from Monarch Reptiles. I think you
Yeah.
guys would have a lot to talk about. He's doing some awesome stuff with colubrids as well. Super fast metabolism. So what temperature I like or like what temperature ranges are you keeping them at? How hot do they need to be?
My indigos are at about 85 to 90 degrees. They're in a 6 foot long tank, so they have the option to adjust their own temperature. I have
Yeah.
them on a radiant heat panel, so I keep the heat panel at 87 degrees, and I have a piece of slate underneath the tank, under the heat panel, so that heats up. If they want to bask on a rock, they'll go on top of that, and I have basically trap boxes for them to hide in, which is easier for me to make. So
That's interesting. So okay, so I know you said you're kind of giving them space and you're not really pairing them, you're not doing
yeah,
all that, but like well, first of all, do you cool them every year even when you're
yeah.
not trying to breed them? You are cooling them.
Yeah, I have to cool them for. I try to cool my males for about a month and a half, and even in during cooling, he's still eating. He's still eating quite a bit of food, more than I expect him to. And
Yeah.
I try lowering the temperature every year, but he's still just as responsive
It still
when I'm
keeps
cooling
eating.
him.
Yeah.
So like their drive doesn't change if it's cooler temperatures or warmer temperatures, for, as far as I've seen.
So how do you go about cooling? Do you take him out of the tank and put him in a different tank or
No, I just reduce the temperature that the heat panel puts out. I drop it down to during the day the temperature drops from 87 to 80, and then at night it drops to 74, 70, between 74 and 76.
right?
So and the females I cool at the same temperature, but they're still just as responsive. So I'm not. I either I'm not doing it correctly still, or they're just as driven. So
That's very interesting. And okay, so here's interesting. Do you feed your colubrids anything different than what you're feeding your pythons or your other snakes? I guess you're not really keeping many pythons anymore, yeah?
I have the one ball python for my son.
Yeah.
Uh, he eats rats, or sorry, she eats rats. My boas, I feed them chicks and quails. I feed the indigos fish. I've
You
tried
do.
boas with fish. So they're sometimes responsive to it, sometimes not. I usually have to have them live, and I don't like putting a live fish in the tanks because it makes a huge mess with them. So
Yeah. So what kind of fish do you feed them?
Just like mackerel and stuff right out of the grocery store. I thought
Eh,
out and it's good.
So frozen thawed as well.
Yeah,
Okay, super interesting. Super interesting.
yeah. Because indigos defecate a lot. Like almost immediately after a meal, they'll start defecating across the tank. If
Okay.
you feed them fish, you'll know that they've gone to the bathroom for sure.
Yeah, you can smell. Yeah, I've smelled the smell difference of depending on what you fed the animal. I know exactly
Yeah,
what you mean. Okay, so you said you do cool them, and then so what's the process for them? Is it you pair them for a
yeah.
couple of weeks and then you separate the male, or
I keep them paired from. So I cool them till about December 15th, and then from December 15th to February, March, I try to keep them together. I separate them if I'm feeding them. So I'll separate the male and put it back in his tank
okay,
if I'm feeding them, but that's the only time I separate them. Once they're separated, I feed them, let them digest for a day or two, and then I put them back together. They lock up about 3 to 4 times in that time period, and usually the male does a mating dance, which I've caught on video a few times actually. The moment I put them in, he usually locks up with her.
what's the mating dance? What
Well,
like what's
he literally goes on top of her, tries to like tries to make her responsive. So usually the male goes on top of her, runs his body over top of her on either side, and tries to direct her where he wants her to go. And the female usually, if she's responsive, will submit to that and go ahead with that. But uh, if she's not, like I've never seen her not be responsive because usually when I put them together, they lock up within the first hour. So, but
that's super
yeah.
interesting.
I'll send you a video of it if you want.
Please do, please do. Yeah, I would love to see that. Yeah. Uh, um, are they rear fang venomous?
No, but they have really big teeth. They have really
The nasty
strong
bite.
teeth. Like their bites. I've actually not been bit by an animal, thankfully. I've
Okay,
tried
nice.
not to be. But they're like I've heard their teeth are like a chainsaw. It bites and tears. So it'll be a painful bite. I have no issue getting bit by a snake. I get it. I get bit by green tree pythons all the time. So it's a painful bite. I get it. But
Yeah,
this one, like just the presence they give you when they come at you is just like stay out of my way.
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean everything about the snake screams stay out of my way.
Yeah,
Like I don't yeah, there's not many snake species that I like that I keep saying I really want, but that is definitely one of them. I just don't want to set up this I don't want to dedicate the space to it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
they look like they're an incredible looking species. Um yeah, I don't know. I just love them so much. Um but yeah, and you have so many awesome like rare species to talk about too that we're definitely gonna have to do this again and maybe hit like a different two species next time
For
because
sure. Anytime.
yeah, yeah, it's awesome. Okay, so let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up on this question.
Okay.
What's the next future dream project
Species.
that you're working on
Uh,
or planning to work on or what's in the books?
so hopefully it's the Philippine sailfin dragons. I have a male right now. Hopefully it's I can get a hold of a female.
Awesome.
And that would be one of my dream projects. I already work with the Abenenses at the store. I have a breeding pair at the store, so I've been breeding them for 10 years.
Right.
So if I can get a pair of the Philippine Silver Dragons, that would be phenomenal. Otherwise, for snake species, I don't know. It's just like any species that I've worked with, it hasn't been something I've ever been interested in. If the opportunities come up and I've taken a chance on
Gotta
it,
take them.
and I've
Yeah.
fallen in love with it. So I haven't decided yet. Maybe a carpet python, maybe anacondas because I love anacondas. Apparently,
Yeah.
I took care of a few in the store, and the way they eat underwater is phenomenal. They were amazing. Like I've never
Were they
seen.
like full grown anacondas?
Yeah, no, no. The three. I got it in as a boarding for someone. So at my store we do boarding, and like they brought me three baby anacondas. So I put them in a paludarium, and they weren't eating for him, but the moment I put them in the paludarium, they ate for me within like a couple of days of being in there. And I could feed all three of them in one tank. They would literally drop down into the water, strangle it, and eat the food. It was amazing.
What were you feeding them?
Rats, frozen rats. But yeah, but since I saw that, I've just been like, I gotta get something like that in my house now.
But how would you fit something that big?
And that's the problem. That's the biggest problem.
That's
That's why I don't.
yeah.
That's why I don't have one yet.
Yeah, yeah.
You've
You
been to
need
my
to
house.
dedicate like a room for something like that big.
I would. I'd have to build like. Actually, my friend just gave me a 500-gallon pond.
Oh, there you go. There you
Yeah,
go.
so I
Just
got the
gotta
first
build the
step.
top part for it now.
Exactly, the
Yeah.
first step is there.
Okay. So 500 gallon pond. That's another
That's
project in the
a future
works.
project.
A future project.
Something that if I have space for, I will put out and build something outside.
Okay, awesome, Alex. Thank you very much. That was all very, very, very interesting information on two species that I think, for myself, and I'm sure for many, many other people, are bucket list species. Like they're like dream species for everyone. So thank you very much for all that awesome information and for giving us all your secrets. Um, and yeah, so can you please let everyone know where they can find you?
So I have my Instagram. I work at Big Al, so you can visit me at the store in Scarborough.
Awesome.
Um, but you can also check me out on Instagram at Alex underscore reptile world or Alex underscore C. I think that's the one. Sorry.
They'll be
It-
in the description. Find them in the
exactly. It'll
description.
be in the
Yes.
description. But
Yeah.
Alex underscore reptile world is the one that's going to have the most animal posts and the newest animal posts. So
Awesome. Yeah. And then usually as well, you can find them at the Reptile Expos in
yes.
Toronto.
Yeah, I'm
So
usually vending at one of the at the expos there
yes.
under DNA reptiles.
Yeah. So if you see him at one of the shows, go say what's up. Tell him you love this episode. Tell him you love the species we talked about. But most importantly, give him a follow. And yeah, once again, Alex, thank you very much for coming on and doing this.
No,
We
thank
oh
you so
right
much.
on right on time. The lights just turned
There you
off.
go.
But yeah, we'll have to do. We'll have to pick another two of the species you're working with
For
and
sure,
do it
man.
again. Maybe
Anytime.
the star tortoises
Yeah,
or
that would
whatever
be
they're
cool.
called.
I just got an egg, so hopefully,
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Awesome. That would be awesome.
yeah.
All right. And for everyone else, I am Daffy's Reptiles on all social media platforms. Daffy's Roundtable for the podcast. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you on the next one.